So good morning everyone. So as mentioned no, dili ta makamit for this coming Tuesday, May 12 for our scheduled time for Science, Technology and Society because of conflict of schedule. Basically, we'll be having the C-bar defense for the third year field study students, BSED Science and BSED Math. So instead of meeting you physically to deliver the lesson, I'll just be handing over this pre-recorded lesson para nagyapon tayo ma-learn for this the supposedly scheduled session. So, the lesson 4.3, the continuation, is all about the aspects of gene therapy. This is the second to the last topic for Module 4, the specific issues in STS Part 2. And the last lesson, 4.4, will be delivered next meeting on Thursday. So I'll be delivering that face to face to wrap up the subject, and then after that we'll be having the long quiz for the entire module 4, and that will be the coverage for our final terms, module 3 and module 4. It's all about the issues surrounding STS. Okay, so let's start. So for lesson 4.3, this is all about the aspects of gene therapy. So even though we've discussed this previously in the previous module 3, just an overview of what is a gene therapy, how it works, how it contributes, and what are the downsides of using it sa atong modern society. So we'll be digging deeper into this specific topic, but first let's have our learning outcomes. So at the end of the lesson discussion, the learners should be able to first describe gene therapy and its various forms, second explain the gene therapy issues, potential benefits, and detriments to global health. So same with other scientific technologies and innovation, it have its own pros and cons. So we'll be looking into that further regarding gene therapy. So by definition, gene therapy is the process of modifying or replacing defective genes to treat or prevent disease. So this can be a potential treatment for cancer, genetic disorders. So basically no, very specific and precise and accurate na ang application of medication. And there are also further advancement regarding using gene therapy as cure to cancers and genetic disorders which previously we believed nga wala siya tambal, for example autism or Down syndrome, di ba? Ig-anak congenital naman siya, naano na siya diha pag anak na kay basically daot mo na siya nga chromosomes, no? But for gene therapy, it's now possible to cure that by just simply replacing the gene responsible for that specific syndrome or disorder. And also the same thing for cancers, di ba? So let's check on it further. Let's discuss further. So what is a gene in this context? So we often hear the word in sa biology, no? Sa atong pag high school, sa college, we hear the word gene, DNA, and all those stuff. So in this specific context of gene therapy, so what is a gene? So a gene, it's a segment of DNA that codes for proteins. So basically, proteins control body structure, functions, cellular processes. So think of it as like a factory bitaw, no? So si gene, siya ang nag-code ni protein. Si protein, di ba mo na ang ato ang basically ang structure nga nag-support sa tua. So si gene, siya ang bali mo siya factory in a sense that nga siya ang naghatag sa ingredient nga nag-code sa protein nga himuon sa tong lawas. So that protein nga himuon, it has very varying functions. So pwede siya gamit kanang protein for breaking down mga materials, for defending your bodies against foreign invasions. May nga na, no? So, if si gene ang responsible for coding proteins, for giving the specific nga kini nga protein mo ni iyang function, if ingani nga protein atong himuon mo ni ang tabang sa atong lawas, so if na ay daot ana, then sa pag-code pa lang daan, daot na siya, dako ang consequences, no? The possible detrimental effects sa atong lawas because of that error. So think of it like sa mga techie nga people who are into coding, nga if naalay daot sa imong code gamay bisan slash or period lang na, dili na mo work ang whole nimo nga code nga design untan mo to make something work, di ba? So in this sense, gene is the one that codes for proteins. So it's responsible for our body structure, functions, and cellular processes. So if a gene is defective, disease occurs or mga disorders, mga for example congenital nga disease, Down syndrome, autism, nga na, no? So kadaot man ang imuhang tighimo or tig-code sa protein. So you expect that the outcome or the product will also be defective. So in this sense of gene therapy, if a specific gene is defective, then we just have to cure or to address or to repair that specific gene para ang iyang mahimo nga protein dili na defective and it will work normally as expected. So in this sense, it's curing or repairing the detrimental effects of those disorders caused by the defective gene or ang factory nga naghimo sa imong protein nga na, no? So in administering or the procedural process of gene therapy, we have here the step by step. So first, we identify the defective gene. So to locate og unsay responsible ana. For example, Down syndrome, si chromosome number kuan ang responsible ana nga pagka disorder. So now we identify it. Next, we create a healthy version of the gene. So we can use this either through gene gikan sa imuhang parent or something nga makuhaan nga healthy siya, siyang ideal or siyang perfect bali, no, nga gene dili tong daoton. Now since we now have the healthy nga version of the gene, we deliver it into the patient's cell, so often using modified virus to act as vectors bali. Kining modified nga virus, si virus man gud, no, it's basically a coded na siya nga protein nga once mo tapot na sa imong lawas, it will start producing more of it. So nga na, no? So scientists resort to using virus since basically they are just coded proteins. They use it as a vector para siya ang magdala katong nga tarong nga gene para i-insert adto sa lawas of the recipient nga naay sakit or naay disorder. So now, the corrected gene upon integration to the person's body, this produces a functional proteins. Since na-address naman ni mga, uy, kini siya mo'y daot ato ning pulihan og tarong nga parts. Same ra na for example, no? For example, na kay motor, nya mo nga, uy, daot man imong liigid, buslot. So, di ka kadagan og tarong, kay maraning flat ka. So, you basically just have to look for a new tire, imong kwaon ang daan nga tire nga buslot, then replace it with a new one. Mga na same, very kanang basic nga concept, no? Then eventually in the process, since imo namang gitarong ang nagproduce sa protein, eventually that will produce healthy or katong mga tarong nga protein, eventually outnumbering sa katong responsible for a specific disease or disorder. So we now have step 5, symptoms are reduced or eliminated because of the intervention of gene therapy. So nga na ka siya ka sa, you know, it's just like replacing a worn out tire. Nga na lang. So I have here a picture. So the first step, cells are removed from patient. Next, so in a laboratory, virus altered, so it cannot reproduce. So basically gigamit lang nato iyang pagka-coded protein, not potent enough or disabled siya to start reproducing inigsud sa imong lawas. So gihimo na to siya vector, tigkarga sa mensahe or tigkarga sa imong parts nga ilisan. Mura siya JNT in a sense. So next, the normal gene is inserted into the virus. Then the altered virus is mixed with cells from the patient. Then that entry of the new gene into the nucleus of the patient, then once it's accepted and ni-adapt na siya sa bag-ong environment sa nucleus, then the nucleus will now identify that newly integrated gene as normal and will use that specific na gene or something to code the proteins nga sakto nga tarong. Mura rin gihatagan kag bag-o nga formula. Nga oy mo ni ang sakto nga formula para makahimo ka nig tarong nga protein. So ingan niya na buhata sa mga ayon to paghimo atong daot. So mo nga na siya, no, on how it works. So we have different types of gene therapy which have different effects, different usage, and comes with different issues, ethical and social concerns. So let's take a look at each one of them. First, we have the somatic gene therapy. So this kind of gene therapy, it targets body or somatic cells. So key characteristics, it's not inherited, affects only the treated individual. So for example, if that person is suffering from a disease or disorder, for example, cancer, if let's just say very specific, let's say liver cancer. So caused siya no by kanang abnormal nga mga liver cells nga nagreproduce nga dili jud to mao ang normal nga liver cells, which is maong na cancer siya kay nagproduce siya og dili mao. So nga no defective iyang mga produkto. So now this somatic gene therapy cures this kind of diseases. So basically they produce or take out a healthy liver cell, insert it into a virus, then that virus is delivered into your liver, which by the nucleus accepting that newly introduced nga liver cells through the virus acting as the vector, then it will now start producing the healthy version or mga sakto, mga tarong na version of your liver cells. Eventually, it reduces the symptoms kay katong mga cancer cells nga daan nga ni-reproduce no before the gene therapy. Eventually mawala man pud to siya kay di ba our body constantly depletes or nag-destroy og cells. However, on the other side, constantly pod naga replenish og cells. So different kind of cells, so skin cell, brains, basta different cells atong lawas. It's in constant destruction and replenishment from day to day process. So if nga nga sense, you introduced a healthy gene to produce healthy liver cells, then you now produce healthy nga liver cells. Dili na katong mga cancerous. So in this very sense, it only targets body or the somatic cell, and it only affects the treated individual. So dili nimo siya mapasa ng therapy sa imuhang anak, sa imong kaapuhan ba na diha in the future generations, no? So it only stays with the person being cured or having that gene, somatic gene therapy. So for example, treating cancer cells or treating blood disorders. So it's safer, ethically, and more widely accepted. So another example, no, for example, sickle cell anemia. So basically, ang hinungdan anak kay ang imuhang red blood cell supposedly nga nagporma no murag donut or murag tabletas. However, sickle cell anemia, imuhang red blood cell nga na magporma mura magkanang sa tawag na nga moon, basta mura siya buwan nga 1/4 ba. So in that sense, inig-agya na sa imong dugo, magbara na siya, which leads to lesser oxygen nga ma-delivered sa imuhang lawas. Kay dili man siya maudod ihang porma nga mo flow rag tarong sa within sa imong blood vessels, di ba? So in that sense, daot ang red blood cell nga imong gihimo sa imong lawas. So if in this sense, imong RBC ang daot, mogamit kag gene therapy, introducean ka og katong tarong nga red blood cell nga ni siya nga gene nga oy mo ni bag-ong mo ni saktong recipe ihatag na sa imong nucleus kay didto man sila mag-produce og proteins no dito sa imong ribosomes. So now by accepting sa imong nucleus nga nagdawat si N ako represent, it now starts producing the normal nga red blood cell. So it treats the blood disorder. So dili na siya muhimo og parehaan ni nga cell no kining murag moon og porma nga mo'y nakakos sa pagka-anemic sa tao because of this so-called sickle cell anemia. So basically it just targets body cells. Diharataman, wala na pasa-pasa dito sa sunod pang henerasyon. Next, the other type of gene therapy is the germline gene therapy. So from the name itself, no, line, naa na siya continuous na nga pagkapasa-pasa kay abot ng taglinya. So basically, this targets reproductive cells. So for example, we have the egg, the sperm, the embryo. So key characteristics. This is heritable, passed to future generations, and one of its Marashag pros is that it prevents genetic diseases before birth. So, advanced naman kayong technology karon no? Before pa maanak imong bata, ma-detect na sa doktor by na siya specific nga kanang tawag na sa ubigay ni no, wherein ilang i-check if tarong ba yung bata unsa ba possible nga daot. Unya if ma-find out nila nga may daot, makura po na. In a sense nga it prevents genetic defects before birth. And here's the thing, since you alter the reproductive cells, could either be the egg, the sperm, the embryo, then in the very sense that it's inheritable, mapasa-pasa siya. So let's take a look further on unsa kaya ang issue. So this could, if you think about it, it's a good thing man no nga samot na katong mga parents nga they just want, of course all of us wants a normal child inig panganak. Wala man siguro ganahan og kanang abnormal lang bata no, autistic ba diha, ma-DS or Down syndrome. Pero if it comes to it, if you have the budget, you can resort to this therapy para your child will be born nga normal. However, with every innovation, with every technology, here comes the abuse. Diha na musod ang ato ang cons, even though it's just fragment lang din pud siya for the innovation or for the betterment of mankind, especially sa katong naka-experience ng disease, no? So, this germline gene therapy, it's highly controversial. Why? In a sense that before a child is being born, pwede na ta maka-modify sa iyang DNA, sa iyang gene, ug unsa siya iyang characteristics, di ba? As akong gi-mention sa previous na to nga module nga, if you have the money, you have the technology, you have access to it, then you can just basically more like mag-pre-order na ka og bata, no? Nga gusto ko nga ni para na sa picture, akong bata high IQ, walay inherited disease, athletic siya, low risk of Alzheimer's and stroke, perfect vision, bright, perfect na. So, in a sense that we are able to pre-order a child on its specific characteristics before pa siya ipanganak, it affects biodiversity. Kaya diba sa akong example last time nga, sa inyong klase na aman dyan ay kanang may mag-leader-leader, na ay artist, na ay sugoon, na ay may mulutog pansit kanton. So if tanan, bright na diha, howd na tanan, kinsa na lang may buhat atong trabaho atong masugo, or katong kinsa na may muluto sa kanton, di ba? Very concrete na example, but it makes sense. So that's the controversial issue regarding this. So basically, you're making designer babies. And here's the thing, the a wonderful thought no nga worth considering. The people, oh no, very in the first place, gene therapy is expensive. Only those who have money can access this, 'di ba? Mga third world countries, wala tay budget para ana. Adto na sa mga first world countries. Now, if these people, mga highly influential, wealthy individuals, will be making this kind of babies as ilang anak and let them go to universities as expected, mo excel, no? And eventually, who knows, might even become the country's leader, for example. So, if these influential and wealthy people will keep on producing babies, humans like this, pre-designed on top of the food chain, no? Mga apex predators, kay lagi, naana nila tanan. Nanay monopoly of control. Samot na sa politiko, no? For example, ganyan sa tuwa sa Philippines, ay political dynasty to ensure nga the same family will be the one in control of a specific region or a specific nga distrito, di ba? So how much more on a larger scale if these influential and wealthy people sila na access ani nga technology, then they can just make babies like this, humans like this, so that ensured nga kini gyapon nga mga tao ang mo excel sa fields nga ilahang gusto kontrolon, and even countries or even places. So yeah, that's the controversial part about it. So benefits of gene therapy. So first one, treatment of genetic diseases. So for example, as akong gihatag ganiha, sickle cell anemia, hemophilia. Hemophilia is basically kanang bitaw dali maayo imong samad or yung nana. Mura siya lack of platelets. So masige ra kag dugo, masamad ka diha. Sige ra kag agas-agas ang dugo sa imong samad. So common na siya sa mga royal royal blood ato sa gawas. So basically blood does not clot properly. So dili matapakan ang samad. So magsig agas nun. So this kind of diseases is caused by a defective gene. So basically daot ilahang gi-produce nga cell or protein to be specific. So instead of treating the symptoms, they fix the root cause. So ang sala man jud ana kay ang naghimo man. So atong ilisan ang naghimo or responsible sa paghimo ng protein. So that's one of the benefits. Dali na kaayo. Di na kailangan pag mag-antos. Actually no, ang even the royal family before this scientific breakthrough of gene therapy, they suffered generations of hemophilia because of inbreeding man sad good. Pero now that na siya, then they can just treat this. Then yeah, cancer treatment. So gene therapy can modify immune cells, target cancer cells. So for example, the CAR T cell therapy. So sa T cell no, mao ni ang imuhang part sa imuhang lawas nga mo na mo patay sa mga defective nga mga cells nimo. So bali within nga cells nimo ihang atakihon, dili kay mga foreign invasive nga cells. So if nakay daot di nga cell nga padung namuhimo og cancer, is siya mo patay ani. So sa katong mga cancer patients, if taas ilang T cell, then most likely maayo ra sila kay i-repair na si lawas. So for example, how does a CAR T cell therapy work? So step 1, T cell collection. So T cells are collected from patient. So step 2, they engineer or reprogram collected T cells in lab to produce chimeric antigen receptors which find and kill cancer cells. So mas efficient ang iyahang kuan kay mura siya gi-program nga ingani nga cell imong atakihon na exode nimo. So next, expansion. So modified cancer killing T cells multiply into the billions in the lab. So padaghanon siya at first. Then during chemotherapy and infusion, kay i-infuse siya sa imuhang system. Then once it's integrated sa imong lawas, dawat na siya sa imong nucleus and start producing na siya yung nga proteins, then it starts killing and finding cancer cells. So mas dali na siya no. Fast, efficient, and reliable nga method of treating cancer. Next, personalized medicine. So this treatment based on individual genetic profile. Kay for example, if mo yung kaog ang usa ka tawo na siya'y sakit sa heart, na usa ka tawo na sakit sa heart, dili mo na pasabot nga pareha sila ni sakit sa heart, pareha na kag tambal ihatag. No, it's a case to case basis kay lagi each individual has their genetic profile nga ni ihang specific nga sakit, unya ang usa kay type 1 di ay, ang usa kay type 2 nga na bitaw. So in this sense, by using gene therapy, you identify what's the defective cell causing the disorder for each individual, then you create a medicine or an intervention that can directly address that specific kind of disease nga ilang experience or nasinatian. So it's a tailored treatment rather than a generic nga tambal. So mas dali siya no? Kay they attack the root cause. They identify what's really the problem. And dili lang kay bantog parehar ni sila so parehar ni tambal. No. That's not the human biology man good, no, it's very diverse siya, and lahi-lahi jud tag reaction with different interventions. So doesn't mean nga ni work sa usa mo work po na sa lain. Most of the time, no, ato makita because generalized naman lagi ang tambal, pero nadjud po uban nga mo experience. So for example, allergic reaction, dili ka uyon sa tambal, so mangitan pug lain. Pero through gene therapy, we can address this kind of problems nga present sa ato ang current medicine nga ginagamit. So first, let's have the risks and ethical issues. So naghihatagan ng benefits, no? So let's take a deeper look into it. Yeah, as mentioned previously, designer babies. So editing traits like intelligence, appearance, abilities. So this raises equity issues or equality, so equity, equality. Yeah, moral concerns kay basically you're not playing the hands of God. Ikaw na nagbuot ug unsay porma sa imong bata. Anya equality or equity issues. Wa katon kini mga hawd pirmi sa ato ang society kay sila may kwarta, sila may kaya nga magpadaghan, no? So if sa inyong klase puro na designer babies na ikaw ra gikan Pilipinas, luoy kay ka, di ba? Murag ikay pirmi behind, di ka kaget silang joke, di ka kasabay silang mga trip, kay lahi man silang pangutok, lahi man silang tripping, kay lahi silang DNA. So next, accessibility and cost. So gene therapy is extremely expensive. So only wealthy individuals or countries benefits. So this leads to further health inequality. So inequality in the world of scientific technology and innovations, inequality will be always a primary issue. Okay, lagi, the rich keeps on getting richer and the poor becomes poorer. So basically, it widens the gap even more. Because we feel the differences nga ala, nga ni di mabuhat is mga dato, no? Mga pobre, walang sa ta, tanaw lang sa taman. Then, third is long-term unknown effects. So possible unintended mutations, so unknown future consequences. So this is especially dangerous for germline editing since the gene can be inherited from generations to generations. So same sa itong example, no, sa GMO last time nga if mag-modify ka diha og usa ka apple maganahan ka pareha kadako sa basketball, unya karon kining apple nga basketball kadak-an ni pollinate didto sa sagbot, o nanong kay sagbot sa imuhang backyard nga baling tag-asa mura nagmangga ka taas, di ba? So same ra po ni sa tao, we can't assure what nature will produce man good because lagi we can track everything, and this kind of innovation is still new. So wala pa jud siya mga further risk study, wala pa yung mga supporting research nga makaprove unsa siya ka safe or unsa siya ka dangerous. Pero based on human history, on how human came to be as it is now, mutation will always be there. We adapt man good to different environmental conditions. So this is also a result of it, mutation. So if those edited nga genes nga napasa to different generations, if they mutate, unsa kay resulta, no? We don't know. So yeah. Now let's take a look into the real world connection, how this affects us or how this affects other people, and why this topic should be a point of concern among us. So the very main reason why we have this science, technology, and society nga subject. Rapid global expansion. So gene therapy is becoming more advanced, more accessible slowly because they are expanding to more countries, and naman po yung mga interventions gibuhat ng ubang countries no nga maka-afford that and to access that kind of technology, and more widely researched. So as mentioned nga, kuwang patag data, kuwang patag research to prove on unsayang effects. So as of now, it's becoming a trend to fill the gap of that new innovation. Then current trends, breakthroughs, new treatments for rare diseases, improved delivery systems. So for example, years before, let's say around the 18th century, wala pa nakahuna-huna nga ang AIDS or ang cancer, no, is na disease. Pero karon, like as mentioned, for example, by using gene therapy, it cannot be cured. So it solves the problem of the society in terms of health concerns. Now, challenges. Regulation varies across countries. Ethical standards are not universal. So doesn't mean nga, for example, no, very specific examples for us Filipinos, mukaon ta og ginamos. However, if moadto ka sa Spain, kita ng mga Spain, uy, kaon ra ginamos, baho mo na, daot na mga isda. Mura kag buang kitaon sila ha, no? Mura kag mangmang because you consume a spoiled nga fish, or daot na nga fish. Pero it's culture to culture. So, in the same sense, the ethical standards as to what we can tolerate, for example, for US, they can tolerate making designer babies because mo norm sila ha. However, for us sa Philippines, soko na magitag na political dynasty kay mura ng mga tawhan nagsibalik-balik din nagpahimulo sa resources sa usa ka lugar o sa atong nasod. How much more if designer babies will be produced? So the same people will be the one in control for generations to come because they have the means. Then regulation varies across countries. So again, as mentioned previously sa previous module, there are different political, social nga powers influencing the implementations and making of regulations surrounding different technologies. So doesn't mean nga okay ani nga country, for example lang ha. Example for Canada, legal ang marijuana pero gari ka Pinas, awdak pun juga kay adik-adik naman ka kitaon, di ba? So nga lahi siya ang regulations. So science is advancing faster than global policies can regulate it. For example, sa to other sa Philippines, when we make a resolution or we make a law, pila pa nakaproseso agian mo agi pa na una sa House of Representatives, mo ato sa Senado, then ay pa na aproban dito sa taas, yung ano, taas og proseso. Now, if science is rapidly evolving, more innovations are being discovered or being created as each day passes by, the policies and regulations can't keep up because it's producing more innovations than they could process given the SOP of regulation, production, and implementation. So, ma-outpace jud siya. So, I have here, just for critical thinking, no, for you to think about. If we have the power to edit human genes, should we use it? Dapat na to buhaton? What do you think? So, I leave that question to you for you to answer. So, to wrap up this discussion about gene therapy, gene therapy gives humanity the power to rewrite life itself, so acting like God. But with that power comes responsibility, ethics, and consequences that extend beyond science, so influencing different frontiers such as the social, political, and ethical concerns. It's not always limited to it's just a science, but it's science that can be used to influence and to affect the current status quo of different industries. Okay? So yeah, that wraps up our topic regarding gene therapy. And we'll meet this Thursday and I will discuss the next lesson, which is all about climate change. Okay? So see you. Bye-bye.